I want to tell you without a doubt that the experience you are about to watch is one of the most accurate experiences we have shared here. Why? Because the prophet who shared this experience works with dates and was able to place specific dates to the things he saw and the things that are bound to happen. Anyone who stays until the end will see the truth in this experience that was shared and beyond the truth. I am telling you, brothers and sisters, there is a need to get ready and prepare all your items. Close your doors on certain dates and, most importantly, be alert on some days. Stay until the end, friend, and get this truth. Tell us where you are watching from so we can pray along with you. Please be patient and follow through gradually. Now, I will begin sharing today's experience. My name is David Rosen, and I am a prophet in Israel. Not the kind you read about in ancient history books, or the ones whose stories fill the pages of the Old Testament, but a man whom God has called in these final days to speak his truth to a world that has grown comfortable with lies and distraction. I have been walking with God for 53 years, through seasons of breakthrough and seasons of deep questioning, through visions and through silence, through moments when I heard his voice so clearly it seemed to shake the very foundations of my faith. I have seen things in the spiritual realm that most people will never witness in their entire lives. And I have heard the voice of God speak to my spirit in ways that are impossible to translate into ordinary words. For most of my life, I have kept my encounters private. God has given me many visions, many words, many experiences that were meant for my own spiritual growth, for my own understanding, for the deepening of my own relationship with Him. These were personal encounters, meant to shape me, to refine me, to prepare me for the work He had called me to do. I have never been one to broadcast every spiritual experience or seek attention through the miraculous. This has been my way to receive what God gives me, to let it transform my heart, and to minister quietly to those around me. But something changed. In recent weeks, particularly since the encounter I experienced on March 7th, God has made it abundantly clear to me that this message is not for me alone. This is not a personal revelation meant for my private spiritual journey. This is a warning, a call, a final plea to a world that needs to understand what is coming. Not to be paralyzed by fear, but to be awakened to reality and prepared in their hearts and spirits. I need to tell you this experience because God has been relentless with me about it. He has impressed upon me with increasing urgency that people need to understand these things, and that my silence would be a form of disobedience. When God gives you a message meant for His people, when He shows you what is approaching, when He reveals to you that time is shorter than anyone realizes, you cannot stay quiet. You must speak, even if people mock you, even if people dismiss you, even if people think you are crazy. Because the lives that are touched by this message, the souls that turn to seek God because of what I am about to share with you, the families that prepare themselves spiritually for what is coming, these depend on my willingness to be completely honest about what I experienced. On March 3rd, 2026, a blood moon appeared in the sky. I remember that night. I stood outside my home with my wife, and we watched as the moon slowly moved into the shadow of the earth. The bright white surface that I had known all my life began to darken gradually, like someone was drawing a curtain across something bright, and then the transformation was complete. The red appeared a copper red, a blood red, a color that made you feel something deep in your stomach when you looked at it. It was beautiful in a way that was almost unsettling. Many people around the world took notice. Believers and prophecy watchers spoke about it, debated its meaning, wondered if it was a sign from God. I watched it, acknowledged it, and then I moved on. I went back inside. I returned to my normal life. I attributed it to an interesting astronomical event and nothing more. I had seen many things in my years as a prophet. I had experienced visions and encounters. I knew what the voice of God sounded like when He was speaking to me directly. And on that night, watching the blood moon turn red, I did not hear His voice. Or perhaps, more truthfully, I was not listening carefully enough. I did not sense any urgent warning or pressing revelation. It seemed like a beautiful celestial event, nothing more. So I let it pass. The moon returned to its normal color. The night moved on, and the world, as it always does, moved on with it. The days following the blood moon were ordinary in every way. I continued my work as a prophet and spiritual guide to my congregation. I prepared sermons, I counseled people, I prayed, I spent time in God's Word. My wife and I continued the rhythms of our life together, meals together, conversations about the scriptures, the gentle patterns of a long marriage. But there was something underneath the ordinariness that I could not quite name. It was like a low hum that I could feel, but not hear. Like tension in the air that I could sense, but not see. In my prayer times, I found myself being drawn again and again to the book of Joel. Those passages about blood and fire, about the sun turning to darkness and the moon being transformed into the color of blood. Why was I drawn there so persistently? I did not know. It was like the Holy Spirit was pressing those words into my spirit, asking me to pay attention, but I was not understanding the message yet. I continued to wonder about the blood moon. Had it meant something? Was it significant? Or was I overthinking it, reading spiritual meaning into a natural astronomical event? I did not know. And then, 4 days later, everything changed. I was sitting in my study that evening, surrounded by the familiar objects that had become the landscape of my spiritual life over many decades. My leather-bound Bible sat on the desk before me, worn from years of turning its pages, annotated with my own notes and reflections, gathered from a lifetime of seeking God. The room was quiet in that particular way that only happens when the sun is beginning to set and the day is transitioning into evening, when the noise of the world seems to recede just slightly, making space for deeper thoughts and higher communication. I had spent the entire afternoon preparing reflections that I would share the following morning, working carefully through the scriptures and asking God to give me words that would speak to the hearts of the people in my congregation who were hungry for truth. My chest felt a little tight, the kind of tightness that you notice, but do not immediately worry about, the kind that you attribute to the simple fact that I am an old man now, 68 years of age, and my body no longer responds to the world with the same vigor and energy that it did when I was younger. The weight of something that God had placed on my heart seemed to be pressing down physically as well, a feeling I had grown accustomed to over my years of serving as a prophet. My wife was downstairs in our kitchen, and I could hear her gentle movements as she prepared food for the next morning's meal. The smell of olive oil and fresh bread filled the house, familiar and comforting. The kinds of smells that make you feel grounded and secure in the rhythms of family and home. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed like it was exactly as it should be. The ordinariness of an evening in an old prophet's house in Israel. Nothing to suggest that within the next few minutes, my entire existence would be interrupted and I would be pulled into a realm of experience that would forever change my understanding of what it means to be alive. Then the pain came, sudden and violent and completely without warning or mercy. It was not the kind of pain that comes gradually, with little warnings that give you time to prepare yourself or call for help. It was not gentle or subtle. It was like someone had reached directly into my chest with a hand that was strong beyond measure, and grabbed hold of my heart and squeezed it with a force that I could not possibly resist. Overcome, I tried desperately to breathe, but the air would not come into my lungs, and I tried to stand up from my chair. Tried to reach toward the door so that I could call for Sarah, but my legs would not obey the commands that my brain was sending out, and my body simply collapsed forward onto my desk. I remember thinking with perfect clarity, in that moment when you know that something truly serious is happening, something that might be ending your life in this moment. This is it. This is how it ends. This is how my experience concludes. And my face knocked against the open pages of the book of Joel that had been sitting in front of me. I could feel my heart pounding with a rhythm that was completely irregular and wrong, racing and stumbling and struggling like a bird that has been trapped inside a room and is desperately trying to find an exit that does not exist. I tried to call out for Sarah, to cry for help, to reach toward anyone who could hear me and could help me in this moment, but there was no voice left in me. No ability to produce sound or to communicate what was happening. There was only silence, growing deeper and more complete. And then even that silence seemed to fade away into something else, something beyond my ability to describe or understand. When I opened my eyes again, I was standing in a place that I had never seen before in all my years of life. And yet, at the same time, it felt like the most familiar place I had ever been. The geography of it was not earthly in any conventional sense. There was no ground beneath my feet that I could identify as soil or stone, and there was no sky above me that resembled the sky I had known my entire life. The light was completely different from anything I had experienced before. It was not like sunlight that comes from the sun, and it was not like the artificial light that comes from lamps or fires or electric bulbs. It was as if the light itself had become alive and conscious, as if the light was breathing and aware, as if I was standing inside a presence that expressed itself through illumination. I looked down at my hands, and I could see them clearly before me, but they were not quite the same as the hands I had known and inhabited my whole life. They were more real somehow, more vividly present, more there than they had ever been before. The definition and clarity was so sharp that it made the hands I had owned in my physical body seem like dim shadows in comparison. My body felt strong and whole and healed, and the pain in my chest that had been tearing me apart moments before was completely and utterly gone. I did not feel dead in the way that I had been taught to think about death, as the absence of life and consciousness, nor did I feel alive in the way that I had been alive a few moments before in my study, caught in the physical limitations of an aging body that moved through three-dimensional space. Instead, I felt like I was standing in between these two states, in the space where one kind of existence ends and something else begins, in a transition zone where the rules of the earthly realm no longer applied, but I had not yet fully entered into whatever came next. Then I heard a voice, not with my physical ears, which no longer existed in the conventional sense, but with something much deeper and more fundamental. It was as if knowledge appeared inside my consciousness, complete and clear and undeniable, and that knowledge was telling me something essential about my current situation. The voice told me not to be afraid, that everything that was happening was part of a larger plan, that I was not lost or abandoned, but exactly where I needed to be at this moment in time. I was not afraid. I found that there was no room for fear in this place, this realm where God's presence was more obvious and real than the ground beneath my feet had ever been. What I felt instead was something like wonder mixed with deep understanding, like all the questions I had been asking my entire life about the nature of reality and the existence of God were suddenly being answered not through words or explanations, but through direct experience and knowing. And then, without any transition or warning, the vision began. I was suddenly standing in a high place, looking down at the night sky that opened up below me like an infinite canvas. The date shifted in my consciousness somehow, and I understood that I was being shown the morning of March 3rd, 2026, the morning when the blood moon would appear. I was watching the eclipse unfold in real time, but not as I had watched it from the Earth. I was witnessing it from a perspective that seemed to be outside of normal space, as if I could see the event from multiple angles and distances simultaneously. The moon moved into the shadow of the Earth slowly and carefully, following a path that had been designed and ordained long ago, before any of us had been born, before the world as we know it had even been created. The light began to change gradually, and the bright white surface of the moon that I had known my whole life began to darken. And then the transformation was complete, and the red appeared. It was a red that seemed to contain depth and meaning, a copper red, a blood red, a color that made you feel something in your stomach when you looked at it. The entire moon was transformed, utterly changed from what it had been moments before, and I understood in that moment that this was not just an astronomical event that happened to occur because of the orbital mechanics of the Earth and Mu. This was a sign. This was God writing a message across the sky in a language that every human being on the earth could read and understand, a message that transcended culture and language and education and belief system. I watched this unfold, and I knew with complete certainty that this was real, that this had already happened in the past. I had watched it myself just 4 days ago, but I was seeing it now in a different way. I was seeing not just the event itself, but the meaning that existed underneath the event, the purpose and the intention that had guided it into being. It was like I was watching both the sign and the thing being signaled at the same time, understanding both the earthly event and its heavenly significance in one complete vision. And then Jesus appeared beside me, and I understood immediately who he was. Not a painting or a statue, not something made of stone or paint or religious symbolism, but him, the one whose name means salvation, the one who came to earth and died and rose again, the one who loved humanity so much that he was willing to sacrifice everything for the possibility of redemption. He was looking at the blood moon the same way that I was looking at it, and I could feel his presence beside me with such intensity and reality that it seemed impossible that I had ever believed in him only through faith and revelation. Here he was, present and real and solid, and I understood in that moment why the disciples had been so certain, why they had been willing to die for what they had seen and touched and known. Then he turned to me, and I felt him begin to reveal something to me. What I was about to see was not new. It was not something that God had suddenly thought of. This was something that had been written down 5,000 years ago, something that the ancient prophets had seen in visions and recorded, something that the prophets throughout history had spoken about and warned about, something that Jesus himself had tried to tell people about when he walked on the earth in Galilee. But there was something else, something about timing, something about urgency. Jesus spoke to me, and his words were not spoken with human language, but impressed directly into my consciousness with absolute clarity. David, the blood moon that appeared on March 3rd was a marker, a beginning point. Everything that I am about to show you, all of it, every vision, every revelation, every warning, these things will unfold, beginning 40 days after that sign appeared in the sky. You are receiving these visions now, so that you will understand what is happening when it begins. You will be a witness. You will be able to tell people that this was not random, this was not accidental, this was all written and foretold. I understood immediately what this meant. The blood moon had appeared on March 3rd. 40 days from that date would be approximately April 12th. We were already in April now. The time was already here. The 40 days were not some distant future event. They were happening now, in this very moment. While I was receiving this vision on March 7th, Jesus continued, I am showing you these things now because people need time to prepare. They need to understand what is coming. They need to make decisions about who they will serve, about what they will trust, about whether they will root themselves in me before the events unfold. Some will hear this message and will respond. They will turn to seek me. They will build a foundation of faith that cannot be shaken. And when the hard times come, they will stand. He looked at me intently, and I felt the weight of what was being asked of me. Others will not listen. Many will hear and will dismiss what you say. Many will think you are deluded or fearful or attention-seeking. But some will hear, David. Some will understand. Some will take these words seriously and will allow them to change their lives. And those people will survive what is coming. They will not be left unprepared. They will not be caught sleeping. I understood then why Jesus was telling me this on March 7th, 4 days after the blood moon, with only 33 days remaining until the 40-day mark. He was giving me time to deliver the message. He was giving people time to respond. But time was moving quickly. For many years I have guarded my spiritual experiences carefully. This has been my way. When God has given me personal visions, personal words, personal encounters meant for my own spiritual formation, I have received them. I have meditated on them. I have let them transform me, and I have spoken about them only with those whom God placed in my path. I have never been one to run to the microphone or to demand an audience or to broadcast every spiritual experience. This has been right. This has been wisdom. Not every encounter is meant to be shared publicly. But this encounter is different. This is not a word for me. Bell, here's what happened to me in the weeks after receiving this vision. I tried to remain silent. I told myself that I would be more cautious, that I would wait, that I would see if God would confirm this message through other means, through other voices, through other prophets. I did not want to be the only one saying these things. I did not want to stand alone. But God would not let me rest. Night after night, I found myself being drawn back to prayer, back to the scriptures, back to the revelation I had been given. And each time, the impression became stronger. Speak. Tell them. Do not wait. The time is now. In addition, I began to experience other encounters, other visions, other messages from the Holy Spirit. Each one reinforcing the same theme, each one emphasizing the same urgency. Different encounters, different settings, different revelations, but all of them pointing to the same truth. What I saw on March 7th is not personal. It is not meant for me alone. It is a message for God's people. and I am responsible for delivering it. This is not something I wanted. I would have preferred to continue my quiet ministry, to continue my private spiritual life, to let someone else carry this burden. But God does not always give us what we want. He gives us what we need, and He gives us what the world needs. So I am speaking now. I am sharing this now. Not because I am seeking attention or validation or followers, not because I am afraid and try to convince myself that I am safe by warning others, but because God has made it unmistakably clear that this is my responsibility. The blood moon appeared 37 days ago. The 40-day timeline is nearing completion. April is here. The season is beginning, and people need to know. What I was about to see was not powerful in the way that wars or governments or international systems are powerful. It was not something written across the sky in signs and wonders. It was something that happened in people, inside people, in the deepest places of their hearts and souls. I watched as scene after scene unfolded before me. I was shown people all over the world, different people, different countries, different ages, different skin colors, different religions, different backgrounds, different everything that you could possibly think of that would make people different from one another. And yet they all started to feel the same thing at the same time, as if someone had flipped a switch and activated something that had been dormant inside every human being on the planet. It was like a waking up that you could not possibly explain to anyone who did not feel it themselves, like something that had been sleeping deep inside them, suddenly stirred and began to wake, like something was calling them from a place so deep that they could not ignore it or push it away. It was like someone was speaking directly to the most essential part of them, to their soul, to that place inside that knows something is missing, that knows that life is not just about eating and working and sleeping and dying, that knows there has to be something more than the endless cycle of consumption and distraction. I could see people stopping in the middle of their day, frozen by the intensity of this feeling. Someone would be at work, sitting at a desk or standing in a factory, and suddenly they would feel it wash over them, this urgent pull toward something deeper. Someone would be at home going about their ordinary tasks, and something inside them would stir so strongly that they could not continue with what they were doing. Someone would be driving a car or on a bus or walking down a street, and the feeling would be so powerful that they would need to pull over or sit down because they felt like they could not stand anymore. It was like an alarm clock that God was setting off inside people's hearts, a gentle but persistent ringing that said one clear thing. Over and over again, you need to know God. You need to seek God. You need to stop living like God does not matter. You need to turn your face toward the Creator and ask Him to reveal Himself to you. You need to understand that there is something infinitely real waiting for you, and it has been waiting for you your whole life. I watched as people responded to this call in different ways, but they all responded. Some of them immediately started to read the Bible. They had never really read it before. It had been something that sat on a shelf in their house, gathering dust, something that their grandmother had valued but that they had never really taken seriously. But now something inside them compelled them to pick it up and begin to read it. They would wake up in the morning, and before they did anything else, before they checked their email or looked at their messages or prepared breakfast, they would pick up the Bible and they would read. They did not understand everything that they were reading. Many of the passages were confusing to them. The language was sometimes old and hard to follow, but they felt like something was speaking to them from the pages. Something was communicating with them through the words. Something was reaching out to them from across the centuries and the generations and saying, "Yes, I see you. I know you. This is the truth." Other people felt this pull, and they started to go to prayer houses. They had not been to a church in years. Maybe it was decades since they had walked into a religious building and participated in worship or prayer. But they could not stay away anymore. The feeling inside them was too strong, too insistent, too real to ignore. They would walk into a building where people were gathered to pray, and tears would immediately fall from their eyes. They would not even know why they were crying. They did not understand the words being spoken. They did not know the rituals or the songs or the traditions that were being followed. That something in that place felt like home. Something in that place felt like a recognition. Like they had been gone for a long time, and they had finally returned to where they belonged. I watched as prayer became a thing again in the world. Not prayer the way it had been before. Not something that people did because it was tradition or because they thought they were supposed to or because it was the expected thing to do in their culture or their family, but prayer like a conversation with someone you had been missing your whole life. Prayer like words that were forced up out of the deepest places of your being because you could not keep them inside anymore. Prayer like a reaching out with every part of yourself toward a God who might actually hear you. People started to gather. They gathered on different platforms. Some gathered online, in video calls or in live streams, connecting with other people who were feeling the same thing, who were being called in the same way. Some gathered in homes, in living rooms where they could sit together and pray. Some gathered in churches, in mosques, in temples, in places that belonged to different faiths and different traditions and different understandings of who God was. But they were all doing the same thing. They were all reaching toward God. They were all trying to satisfy this strange new feeling that had awakened inside them, this hunger that could not be fed by ordinary things, this thirst that could not be quenched by ordinary water. Jesus revealed to me that this was not strange or weird or crazy or wrong in any way. This was not a deception or a trick. This was God moving inside the hearts of people. This was the Holy Spirit beginning to wake people up because something was coming that would require them to be rooted in something real and eternal and unchanging. If they do not get rooted in God during this time of awakening, Jesus told me, when things get harder, when persecution and suffering come, they will break, they will crumble, they will give up. But if they spend these days and weeks building a foundation of faith, if they spend this time getting to know God through His Word and through prayer and through seeking my face, then when the hard times come, they will have something to stand on. They will have something to hold on to. So God was preparing them now. He was giving them time. He was offering them the opportunity to build a foundation that could not be moved, a faith that could not be shaken, a relationship with Him that would be stronger than anything the world could throw at them. Then the scene changed, and I saw the second thing that was going to happen. And when I saw it, my heart became heavy with the weight of what I was witnessing. I saw empty shelves, long lines of people waiting for things that were not there, things that had always been available before. Things that people had taken for granted and assumed would always be waiting for them when they needed them. Stores that looked like they had been cleaned out, stripped bare of the products that people depended on. Food that was not coming, medicine that was not available, supplies that were not in stock. Things that people had organized their entire lives around, things that they assumed were guaranteed, things that seemed as permanent and reliable as the ground beneath their feet. These things were suddenly just gone. But it was not happening everywhere at once. This was important to understand. It was not a single moment when everything broke down simultaneously across the entire world. It was spreading, like a sickness that starts in one place and then slowly moves to another place and then to another place after that, like a disease that spreads from person to person, from community to community. The systems that people had built their lives around, the systems that they trusted, that they had depended on, that they thought would always be there to catch them if they fell, these systems were beginning to fail. Not all at once, not like a lightning strike that destroys everything in an instant, but like something that was being weakened from the inside, slowly, steadily, gradually, in a way that was hard to see at first, but that became more and more obvious as time went on. Jesus revealed to me that this was not random bad luck or a natural disaster or the result of human error or incompetence. This was a test of faith, a test of whether people would hold on to God or whether they would abandon Him when things got difficult. The people who have gotten rooted in God during the first phase, Jesus told me, the ones who felt that awakening, who responded to the call to seek me, they will understand what is happening. They will have read the Bible and will have understood from the pages of Scripture that I have warned about these times. They will have prayed and will have heard from the Holy Spirit about what was approaching. They will have time to prepare. They will have time to store up supplies and to make plans and to position themselves in a way that will help them survive what is coming. But the people who had ignored that feeling, who had pushed it away and said no to that call, who had decided that they were too busy or too skeptical or too comfortable to turn their lives toward God, these people would be in trouble now. They would be trying to survive. They would be afraid. Their fear would be like a living thing inside them, growing bigger and bigger as conditions got worse and worse. And fear, I understood, is one of the most powerful forces that exists in the human heart. Fear makes people do things they would not normally do. Fear makes people willing to give up things they said they would never give up. Fear makes people believe things they would not normally believe. Fear opens doors that should stay closed. Fear weakens the walls that protect us from deception and manipulation. And the enemy knew this. The devil was waiting. He was waiting to see who would break. He was waiting to see who would become so desperate, so afraid, so willing to do anything to survive that they would be willing to trade their freedom or their identity or their integrity for a promise of safety and security and provision. When people broke, when they got desperate enough, when they had nothing left to hold on to, he would be there. He would offer them solutions. He would offer them ways to survive. He would offer them promises that seemed too good to be true because they were too good to be true. And in exchange for these promises, in exchange for these ways out of their suffering, he would gain access to their hearts. Once he had access, once they had made that deal, he could use them. He could turn them into tools for what was coming next. I understood something very serious in that moment, something that made me want to weep. The hardship that was coming was designed specifically to target the faith of people, to make people give up on God, to break their belief that God cared about them or could protect them or was worth serving. And the only way to survive it, the only way to come through it with your soul intact and your faith unbroken, was to have gotten rooted in God before it started. That was why the first thing had to happen first. That was why God was calling people to seek him now. In these days when April has just begun, when there is still time, when there is still the freedom to choose, that was why the awakening was so important. Because once the second thing started, it would be much harder to hear God's voice, much harder to turn around, much harder to believe that there was still hope. The door would still be open, God would still be calling, but it would be closing, and the window of opportunity was getting smaller and smaller. Then I saw the third thing, and this one made my heart feel heavy in a different way, a heaviness that came from understanding something dark and twisted that was being built underneath what looked like something good and hopeful. I saw a rise in unity, but it was a twisted unity, a unity that was built on something dark. Governments were coming together. Nations that had fought each other for decades were making agreements with one another. Leaders who had opposed each other were sitting down at tables and making plans together. And on the surface it looked good. It looked like peace. It looked like the world finally understanding that war was not the answer, that fighting and destruction and loss of life were not the way to solve problems or achieve goals. It looked like humanity had finally grown up and was choosing cooperation instead of conflict. But underneath it all, underneath this appearance of unity and peace and cooperation, there was something else. There was one agenda, one mission, one goal. And it was not peace. It was control. It was the organization of all the people and all the systems of the world under one authority, one vision, one way of living that did not allow for disagreement or freedom or individual choice. Wars would begin, real wars, conflicts that would shake the world, battles that would destroy cities and lives and families, suffering and loss on scales that would be hard for people to comprehend. And in the middle of all that chaos and destruction and pain, leaders would emerge, charismatic leaders, intelligent leaders, powerful leaders. They would come onto platforms and they would tell people that they had a solution, a one-world government, a one-world system, one leader who could bring everyone together. And they would paint a beautiful picture of how perfect life could be if everyone would just come together under one rule, one vision, one way. They would talk about ending hunger, about creating abundance for everyone, about establishing peace forever, about creating a system where everyone was equal and everyone was cared for and nobody had to suffer anymore. It would sound wonderful. It would sound like exactly what the world needed. And people would want to believe it. They were so tired of war and chaos and suffering that they would want to believe that one person could fix everything. They would want to believe that there was a solution. They would want to believe that all of this pain could finally be over. The promise would be easy at first. The new leader would make life better for some people. There would be benefits. There would be opportunities. There would be things that looked like real improvement. So people would accept it. People would even celebrate it. They would welcome this new leader with open arms and grateful hearts. But the mission was not what it looked like. The mission was darker than that, deeper than that. More sinister than that. The mission was to set up the system that would serve the one whose name should not even be spoken in some languages. The mission was to prepare the way for the Antichrist, and the people who were making these agreements, the leaders who were coming together, they were already serving him. Some of them knew it. Some of them had made a conscious choice to give their loyalty to the darkness. And some of them did not even know it. They thought they were serving humanity. They thought they were serving the cause of peace and progress and enlightenment. But they were being used. They were being manipulated. They were being guided by forces that they did not understand and did not recognize. Then Jesus showed me the fourth thing, and this is where I understood that the situation was not going to be funny anymore. This is where I understood that the game was going to change completely. This is where things were going to become serious in a way that would challenge every aspect of what it meant to be a believer in Jesus in the last days. I saw a mark, and it was not like a brand or a tattoo that you could see from far away, something that was immediately visible and obvious. It was something that fit inside systems, something that connected to money, to commerce, to the ability to participate in society, something that connected to identity, to who you were, to the way that other people knew and recognized you, something that connected to being able to live in this new world that was being created, this world where one government and one system managed everything and everyone. And there were three ways to receive it. The first way was a chip. I was shown how the technology was already being prepared right now, in the present. Before any of these other events happened, I could see scientists and engineers working in laboratories, developing a chip so small that you could barely see it with your eyes, smaller than a grain of rice. It was designed to be inserted under the skin, usually on the wrist or on the forehead. It could hold information, all the information, your identity, your medical records, your banking information, your entire history. Everything that defined a person in this new system could be contained in this tiny chip, and the chip could communicate wirelessly with other systems. It could be tracked. It could be monitored. It could be controlled. And at first, people would be told that it was optional. It would be presented as a convenience. Why carry your wallet when you could have everything inside your body? Why carry documents when all your information was already stored in a chip that was always with you? Why worry about losing your credit cards or your ID when you could simply be scanned? But it would not stay optional. That was the key. That was what Jesus wanted me to understand. At first, it would seem like a choice, but the choice would be removed. Eventually, it would become necessary. It would become required. It would become the only way to participate in the economy that the new one-world system had created. The second way was the forehead. I was shown how the mark would be displayed there on the skin, visible to everyone who looked at you. A sign, a symbol, a declaration that you had accepted the system and had given your loyalty to the new one-world order. It would be like a tattoo or a brand, something that marked you as belonging to the system, something that told everyone you met that you were part of this new arrangement. And the third way was the hand. I cannot fully explain what the third means of administration was, but it was connected to commerce, to buying and selling, to transactions. Your hand would be scanned or used in some way to complete purchases and sales. Without it, you could not buy. Without it, you could not sell. Without it, you could not participate in the economy that the new one-world system had created. Jesus revealed to me that this would not happen all at once, all in a single moment, when everyone was forced to receive the mark at the same time. It would start slowly. It would start with convenience. It would start with the chip, offered as an option, presented as a technological marvel. It would start with the wealthy people getting it first, the famous people, the celebrities and the athletes and the business leaders, and the people who others looked up to. And others would see how easy their lives had become with the chip, and they would want it too. They would line up to get it. They would be excited about getting it. But then, once enough people had it, the rules would change. The authorities would announce that for security reasons, for health reasons, for the good of society, everyone needed to have the chip. It would become necessary. It would become required. Your job would require it. Your bank account would require it. Your ability to access healthcare would require it. Your ability to travel would require it. You would become woven into every aspect of your life so that it would be impossible to refuse without losing everything. And then the people who said no, the people who understood what it meant, the people who remembered the words of the book of Revelation and understood what the mark of the beast was, the people who would rather suffer than accept it. These people would suffer in ways that are hard for me to even describe, even now, thinking back on what I was shown. They would be persecuted not in some distant way, but directly. They would be hunted. They would be pursued. They would be refused service. They would be refused shelter and food and medical care. They would be marked as enemies of the new society. Their bank accounts would be frozen. Their ability to work would be taken from them. They would be separated from their families. Some of them would be imprisoned. Some of them would be killed. I watched as people made a choice in that moment. Suffer or accept. Die or submit. Lose everything you know or give up the thing that makes you who you are. And many people I could see would not be strong enough to refuse. Many people would break. But some would hold on. Some would refuse. Some would choose death rather than dishonor, rather than rejection of God, rather than acceptance of the mark of the beast. And those people would find out what they were truly made of. They would find out whether their faith was real or just something they had said they believed. They would find out whether they were truly willing to follow Jesus no matter the cost. Then Jesus showed me what would come after that. And he revealed to me that this would usher in a lifestyle that would not be easy for believers. The persecution would be real, not exaggerated or dramatic for the sake of experience, but genuinely real. People would suffer. They would be hunted. They would be without food and shelter and safety. They would watch their families be torn apart. They would know hunger and pain and loss. It would be the hardest time that any of them had ever known, the hardest that humanity had ever experienced. But I was also shown something else, something that gave me hope even as I witnessed the darkness and the suffering. I was shown the people who would survive it, and they would not be the strong ones in the way that the world counts strength. They would not be the ones with the most money, or the biggest muscles, or the most power, or the most influential voices. They would not be the ones who were famous or respected or feared by others. The ones who would survive would be the ones who had allowed God to take root in them. The ones who had said yes to that feeling at the beginning. The ones who had spent those early days, these days, right now, in April, seeking God, reading His Word, praying, worshiping, building a relationship with Him that was real and strong. The ones who had gotten rooted in faith, the foundation they had built in the easy times, when they were first responding to the awakening, would hold them up in the hard times, when the wind came, when the pressure was applied, when everything around them was falling apart. They would stand. They would not fall. Jesus showed me this, and I understood something that struck me at the deepest level. This was why the beginning mattered so much. This was why God was calling people to seek Him now, in these days when things are still relatively easy, when they still have time, when they still have the freedom to choose. Because the foundation that you build before the storm determines whether you stand or fall when the wind comes. Then I saw the fifth thing, and at first I did not understand what I was seeing. I was watching and I saw people. They were standing on the earth and they were looking around them at the chaos and the suffering and the darkness that had come. And then I saw them begin to rise. They were being lifted up. Their feet left the ground. They were ascending into the air. All around me, people were being taken up into the sky, believers, those who had held on, those who had refused the mark, those who had suffered and endured and remained faithful. I knew what this was. Every person who has read the Bible and believes in Jesus knows what this is. The rapture. The moment when Jesus comes and takes His people away before the final judgment falls. The moment of rescue. The moment of salvation. The moment when God says to His children, "I have kept you. You are safe now. Come home." I watched as it happened, and my heart was filled with something I cannot fully explain or describe. Hope, relief, understanding, peace, because I understood something that struck me very deeply in that moment. If the first thing had to happen first, if people had to get rooted in God, if the awakening was so important, if God was calling so urgently for people to seek Him right now, it was because God wanted His people to be ready for this. He did not want any of His children to be left behind. He was trying to save them, all of them. every single person that he could reach before that moment. He was giving them chance after chance. He was speaking to them. He was calling them. He was offering them everything. He was doing everything that a loving father could possibly do to bring his children home before the time ran out. And this lifted up moment, this moment when people were taken into the air and away from the chaos below, this was the rescue. This was God saying to his children, "Come, you have endured, you have remained faithful. Now it is time for you to rest. It is time for you to come home. It is time for you to be safe in my arms forever." I watched as believers were lifted up and away from the chaos below, and I understood that this was the promise all along. Not suffering, not death, not the end, but a rescue, a salvation, a going home to the Father, a restoration to paradise. I was watching this, and my heart was filled with so much emotion that I thought it would break. I was crying and laughing at the same time. I was seeing hope in the midst of darkness. I was seeing God's faithfulness despite all the things that would happen. I was seeing that God's plan was always pointing toward this moment, this rescue, this redemption. I opened my mouth. I turned to Jesus. I needed to ask him something, to understand something more deeply, to communicate what I was feeling in that moment. And that is when I woke up. My brothers and sisters in Christ, this is not the hour to sleep. The days ahead are not like the days behind us. What is coming will not be faced with casual faith, borrowed conviction, or a lukewarm heart. The season that is approaching will separate what is real from what is only spoken. It will reveal who truly knows God and who only knows about him. You must understand this clearly. God is not looking for spectators. He is preparing an army, not an army built on strength of the flesh, but one built on surrender, obedience, and unwavering love for him. This is your moment to choose. Choose to love God not with words alone, but with your life. Choose to seek him, not occasionally, but daily, intentionally, desperately. Choose to open your heart, not partially, but completely, holding nothing back, because when this season fully begins, those who have opened their hearts will not be confused. They will not be shaken. They will not be overtaken by fear. Instead, they will recognize the voice of their shepherd. There is a spiritual enrollment already beginning. Quietly, deeply, personally, God is drawing his people not into buildings, not into systems, but into alignment with him, into truth, into holiness, into readiness. Those who respond now, those who humble themselves now, those who return to him now, they are the ones who will stand. They will become part of the army of God, a people who are not moved by fear, not controlled by the world, not deceived by false promises. An army that knows his voice, walks in discernment, stands in truth even when it costs everything, and loves righteousness more than comfort. Do not wait for signs to increase before you take God seriously. Do not wait for hardship before you learn to pray. Do not wait for fear before you build faith. Return to the Word. Return to prayer. Return to a life that is fully surrendered. Let your heart become sensitive again. Let conviction return. Let your hunger for God grow stronger than your attachment to the world, because when everything else begins to shake, only what is rooted in God will stand. The invitation is still open. The door is not yet closed. But it will not remain open forever. April is here. The 40 days are unfolding. The season is upon us. So open your heart now. Turn back fully. Love God deeply. Walk with him truly. And when the time comes, you will not be found unprepared. You will be found ready. And you will stand not in fear but in power, in truth, and in the covering of the Almighty. The time is now. Do not delay.